Betty Boop. She's sexy, daring, and loved by fans all over the world. But she's more than just a pretty face. Betty Boop embodied the changing culture prevalent during World War I and the Jazz Age, represented a changing image of the typical woman, and brought to light controversial subjects not formerly expressed in the media.
Betty Boop was created in the 1930s as America's first flapper cartoon, but what made the flapper image become so popular in the first place? The origins can be connected to World War I, the women's suffrage movement, and the increase of the standard of living post-World War. When World War I started, young men flocked to join the ranks, and women had to fill the jobs the men had left behind. The girls of the generation aggressively entered the workforce with a patriotic fervor. By working stereotypical men jobs, women broke society's structure and gender barriers, making leadway for new images of women to appear like the flapper. Young women decided they did not want to live under a man's restrictions. They wanted to freely enjoy life. With an increase of women's workforce during the war, women finally were able to gain the right to vote. Suffrage groups shifted the movement to become a national campaign, and activists such as Alice Paul pursued more aggressive tactics. Supporters argued that the women's suffrage amendment was vital to win the war because the fight for democracy must begin at home. With the passage of the 19th Amendment, women started to realize their full potential in America's society, and the flapper image captured the changing ideals of the women's role. Lastly, the increase of the standard of living and the invention of new household objects freed up women's time and allowed them to have more time for fun. Irons and vacuum cleaners all made work easier for the women at home. The washing machine, refrigerator, and stove also helped decrease the women's workload. With more time for pleasure, women strayed from their old set of values. Betty Boop symbolized many things from World War II and the Jazz era. Betty's popularity can be contributed to her representation of sexualized women and was one of the first sex symbols of her time. Unlike other girl cartoon characters of the era, who were personified in a childish and pure demeanor, Betty exhibited a certain scandalous image. She wore short dresses, low-cut lines, and full makeup. Some episodes of the cartoon reflected even more intimate images, and in one of the most controversial scenes, a man massaged Betty's legs until he coaxed her into what he wanted. At only 16 years old, Betty stood for one of the most feminine aspects of the culture.
Betty symbolized a number of things besides sexuality. She also represented changing times in the media. During the 20s and 30s, a new culture of celebrity and hero worship emerged. Betty became a national celebrity and was adored by fans across the country. She joined the ranks of other famous celebrities such as Babe Ruth and Clara Bow. Betty Boop was a symbol of all things controversial and immoral. In Chestnuts and Boop Boop a Doop, two animated shorts, Betty was in a circus and was trying to escape the advances of the ringmaster, who was trying to rape her. In Minnie the Moocher, Betty runs away from her mean parents because they keep trying to make her eat her dinner. Rape and a teenage desire for independence from their parents are two controversial topics besides sexuality that Betty symbolized. Betty Boop has had many effects on American society in the past and today. In the beginning, Betty opened the public's eyes to a new culture that was forming and attracted fans across the nation. She brought to the surface topics not formerly displayed in the media, such as rape, rebellious teens, and of course, sexuality. She also contributed to the new celebrity and hero worship culture that developed in the 20s and 30s. However, not all Americans loved Betty. She made enemies with the people who felt she was too immoral. Religious fundamentalists resisted the spread of her popularity, and her series led to an increase in the attempts by the motion picture producers and distributors of America to censor movies. Overall, Betty helped aid the divide between the old culture and the new culture that emerged during the 20s and 30s. Betty Boop is the ultimate symbol of the changing culture in the post-war years and the Jazz Age. She was daring and controversial, loved by some and condemned by others. Following her years of fame in the early 1930s, Betty was made to dress far more conservatively and lost her rebellious and promiscuous nature as a result of censorship. By 1934, the Jazz Age had died, and for a time, Betty died with it. But Betty Boop still remains a symbol of the emerging culture during World War I and the Jazz Age, represents a diverging image of the typical 20s and 30s woman, and is a reminder of daring new topics in the media during that time period.